pleasure and honor to be able to join you all at Human Resources Executives to, again, address how we can rethink culture to win the new contest for talent. I think that was a sticking point there, that this is a new contest as the talent landscape continues to evolve and change. We're hoping to give you the latest updates and insights from our annual Global Culture Report. Well, as mentioned, I'm Meghan Stettler, Director at the O.C. Tanner Institute, where our research and education on workplace culture, the employee experience, and recognition help organizations and their people to thrive. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's always really fun to continue to learn from each other and continue the dialogue well after our time is wrapped up today. But that said, knowing our time is short, let's go ahead and get started. It certainly has been a very challenging couple of years of isolation, social distancing, and uncertainty. I don't know about you, but maybe a lot of us would raise our hands if I asked if anyone had looming feelings of the future. And it really is in this plume of emotion of the past, the present, and the future that employees are really rethinking their lives, and they're looking for new ways of working that are ultimately personally fulfilling to them. We're all craving that sense of belonging and meaningful connections, and we want to feel part of a community, again, after all of this fragmentation and disconnection. And since the spring of 2021, millions of employees have voluntarily quit their jobs in search for something better. The great as well as the hidden resignations, or the quiet quit as we hear it often displayed on social media, have resulted in a new contest for talent that I think makes previous scenarios look like mere skirmishes. In fact, we are really caught at a crossroads in present day. We are between recovering from a recent crisis and preparing for forecasts, albeit economic or political or social, that could really be damaging to cultures. And so part of the challenge that we all have today is determining where to invest our effort and resources, because as a research institute, we have seen workplace culture scores go up, we have seen engagement scores go up, but the great resignation still ticks on. And so as part of our 2023 Global Culture Study, we really dug deep into that employee experience and provided insight into the latest trends and opportunities and challenges in workplace culture. Our research curated the perspectives of 36,000 employees, leaders, and HR stakeholders, such as yourselves, and we analyzed a combined 15 million data points. And those data points were all distilled into the key topics that we will be covering today, namely the need for workplace community, again, amid and after an era of great disconnection. Why finding and sustaining a fulfilling employee experience is really what people are after at work. Why leaders are at risk now more than ever before. The power of integrated recognition, helping to create community and find fulfillment and fortify weary leaders. And really how symbols can be used to unify your people under shared memories. That chapter is particularly very, very interesting. Well, let's go ahead and get started with our first chapter. And this is workplace community. This is really the umbrella theme of this year's report, and I think it's the right one because we've seen the latest trends, the trust in traditional institutions, whether those are political or educational, religious, social, they're increasingly diminishing, and employees are looking at organizations as their new ground zero of community. Well, community, is it the same as workplace culture? Is it different? Well, our research uncovered that it actually is different than culture, but they're very synergistic. Culture is really that heart of your organization. It's the social operating system that influences the way people work and interact together, whereas community is what brings people together and unifies them under shared goals. Essentially, I like to think of it as belonging with a purpose. And it's really crisp, tight definition that ultimately is supported by our research. In fact, when employees have a strong workplace community, we see an 8 times increase in the odds that they feel like they belong. And belonging is really that extension of our DE&I initiatives that we're really after, right? It's feeling like you just can show up as your full self, that you belong in the microfibers of your employee experience. This notion of belonging is incredibly important because it leads to several important outcomes, things like a 43% increase in retention, an 84% increase in estimated tenure, and a near 40% drop in burnout. And knowing that we can only go down by 100%, 40% decline is massive, particularly, again, in an era where we are all struggling with burnout. So this year's Global Culture Report identified 8 essential elements of a strong workplace community, anything from shared goals and commitment to communication and feedback, camaraderie and trust, adaptation, and unity. I think what's most important and exciting about these 8 components is that they make up an index, and we love our indices at the USC Tanner Institute because they provide an excellent framework for leaders to evaluate their current situation, make plans for improvement, and then have the ability to measure that progress over time. I'm sure as you each look at this particular index here, you might be drawn to 2, 3 of these elements. There's one element that really called out to me in the formulation of this, and as I look at this index, all of them have an inherently positive connotation except for one, and that's this notion of feedback. Feedback can be scary. Feedback is critically important. So to me, it's almost the element that you measure the strength of everything else against, right? It can really you can put your thumb on the pulse, so to speak, of your community to say, hey, if we're able to provide feedback in a spirit of respect, then our trust and camaraderie are strong. Yeah, we are committed to advancing our shared goals. Communication is open and fluid, and we're able to adapt based on that feedback. And we're really growing a community of unity in diversity instead of homogeny. But again, if feedback isn't working so well, you can see how it kind of tugs at the strings of everything else. So I'm going to talk to you about a really great, thriving workplace community, and that is American Airlines. I had the opportunity to sit down with Beryl McManus just earlier this year as part of a LinkedIn Live. And, more than any other airline, when you think about it, American Airlines has seen some really trying circumstances. Beryl's been with the organization 22 years, and so she's seen everything from 9/11 to the 2008 recession, global pandemic, now the onset of inflation. And I said, Beryl, how are you keeping your people connected and together? How are you creating this sense of community? And she looked at me and she said, we are in the business of connecting people. So whether our planes were on the ground or in the sky, if people stopped traveling, if they were working from home, it was so important to us to communicate with people frequently and transparently at the top to say, we have seen crisis before. We will weather these storms together, and we will keep us all connected to our communication channels, to our development programs, to our recognition platforms, so we all feel like we are together, that we are seen, that we're heard, that we're valued, that we're growing and developing for whatever comes next. They did an exceptional thing on the other side as well. It wasn't just their employees, their full-time employees that they kept connected. Of course, in the middle of all of this, we all understood that people had to make some very difficult decisions about layoffs and furloughs, and they kept their furloughed employees also connected to all of these tools. And it was really important to them because it was all about connecting them back to the organization's purpose, which is caring for people on life's journey, whether that is a customer or whether that is an employee. So she says here, it's a family here at American. You have each other's back. You're taking care of each other. You're helping people in good times and the bad. And just like anything, this pandemic, it really exposed our strengths as well as our weaknesses. But this was an organization that was able to actively adjust and adapt and to continue to evolve and change amid all of the challenges that had beset them. So just some important considerations as you work to improve that sense of community within your organization. The first one is to really ensure that recognition is integrated into your workplace community. And the reason why is that 3/4 or 74% of employees say that recognition is a crucial part of workplace community. But in order for that to be really felt, it needs to move from a once or twice a year transaction to be a way of life, something that is seen, observed, given, and received throughout the organization very often. It's got to come from peers and leaders, and it's got to acknowledge both the small and the large dimensions of great work in very meaningful and personalized ways. We're going to get to that a little bit later. The second consideration is to practice modern leadership. where leaders really know the individuals on their teams and they actively facilitate their growth and development, and they continually connect them back to the sense of purpose and how they are creating impact in the organization. Got to make that critical shift from doers to influencers and champions of other people. And the last one is to solicit and respond to employee feedback. Again, this is so important because our data indicates that when leaders actively listen and then they appropriately address that feedback, the odds of having a strong workplace community improve by 6 times. 6 times just by providing that feedback loop. So if you take into consideration recognition, leadership, and feedback, the net results of all of these things pulled together dramatically increases the odds that employees feel like they belong, that they would promote and recommend your organization as a great place to work, and that they're actively doing their very best work at your organization. Well, if community is the overall theme of this year's report, then fulfillment is really the overall outcome that employees are searching for. You know, we all work in HR, and we've seen employees come in with a laundry list, right, of their demands. They're using various terms to describe their employee experience and what they hope for in the future. But our research is really clear that it really kind of narrows down to one final word, and that is fulfillment. They are searching for a fulfilling employee experience. And this notion of fulfillment is really meaningful because each one of us can really relate to that sentiment. It's highly emotive, it's highly personal. We know when we're fulfilled and when we aren't. And when we aren't, we are really driven to make changes in order for that to be satisfied. So it really is employee fulfillment, or the lack thereof, that's the primary reason people are deciding to leave or to stay at your organization. Check out this story from Laura. This is really on par with what we're finding. About a third of employees feel like Laura, unfulfilled. She said, I resigned from my dream job only 8 weeks in. I'm sure that made a lot of people shudder on the line, right, thinking about that process. I realized that it wasn't well suited to my skills and background, and while the little devil on my shoulder told me to stick around for the title and the hefty paycheck, I was miserable and unfulfilled, and so I walked. I learned what gives me purpose and joy in my work, and what doesn't. So here I am again, looking for a role that's going to give me all of those things that I crave, right? That sense of deep fulfillment. That's really, really what she and others are looking for. So it really is no surprise that we found that highly fulfilled employees plan to stay 3 years longer at their organizations than those who are unfulfilled. That's an incredible outcome, especially in today's talent landscape, right? This new contest for talent, where people are resigning in big and small ways. 3 years longer, incredible. And it really is these correlations of fulfillment to workplace outcomes like this and others that are really pointing us in this direction, that this might be the superior indicator of employee sentiment and their ability and propensity to do great work compared to even engagement or other traditional measures. So what constitutes fulfillment? Well, we found that fulfillment is derived from 4 concepts. That community connection and belonging that we discussed a little bit earlier, the need for growth and development to become masters in a particular skill set, this need for meaning and purpose in our work, and this notion of balance. Now, this particular employee fulfillment model incorporates and it builds upon last year's finding about the importance of meeting our basic psychological needs that we all have as human beings, that need for autonomy, mastery, and connection. And when those needs are met, again, our basic psychological needs as human beings, it disproportionately impacts our perceptions of our experience at work. So this really is a workplace framework around those basic fundamental psychological needs that we all have. And again, when those are met, it creates these very powerful, peak, memorable experiences that really shape how we view our workplace culture. I want to call out balance in particular here because we normally see it phrased as work-life balance, but there's a bit of a reframe because whether it is work or personal to employees, and it's all life. It's all life. There wasn't a clear dichotomy between its work time and its life. No. Work really operated alongside other various components of life. And so really what employees are looking for here is the autonomy over how they spend their time in life. So balance is really time autonomy. So I want to fire up our first poll question here and ask you which element of fulfillment is maybe most important to you right now. And I bring this up because I was having a discussion with another thought leader in Australia last week. And I said, early in my career, I was really connected to growth and purpose. And those are good combinations for burnout. They really are. When you're so connected to purpose and you want to grow and you want to achieve and you want to climb the economic ladder, everything else kind of goes out of whack. I said, now that I'm in the mid-level part of my career, I really care about balance. And I care about having people around me, that community and that connection and belonging. Not that growth and purpose don't play a critical role, but things have shifted just a little bit in terms of those priorities. So let's see, it looks like our poll, Catherine, has ended. Can we show those results? Oh, fantastic. And actually they're pretty darn balanced, if I have to say so myself. So 25% of our audience saying community, connection, and belonging. Again, we're in this era of isolation and loneliness and fragmentation. We want to feel like we can belong a part of a community. Growth and development, yeah, that's taking a bit of a backseat, 12% there, but still, no one wants to feel like they're stuck inside of a box. And in fact, some of our research showed, and early on in the Great Resignation last August, in fact, that growth and development was one of the number one reasons why people were leaving. It was the lack thereof. Purpose is huge. I'm going to talk about that in a second. 31%. And balance 32%. So it's very interesting. You can see there's a lot of balance and a lot of interplay and exchange here. But man, how important are all four of these areas? Well, let's continue on because when you rate high in all four of these areas, there's a 21 times increased likelihood of fulfillment. Let me tell you about Dow. Very interesting organization. They are doubling down. For all of you balancers out there, they are doubling down on balance. They have a cultural initiative called Design Your Day, where they get to co-create their most optimal schedule with their leaders according to their roles, their responsibilities, and their personal preferences, right? That autonomy factor. And they really ensure that this cultural initiative is interconnected with their DEI and B initiatives. So people feel like they are connected, they are visible, and they are valued no matter where they work or how they work or whom they work with. And again, not just for the work they do, but for who they are. And I think this story is a great reflection of that. Alexander Dahl snapped the shot during a Zoom call. And he said, I love to see these two handsome little guys show up and say hi to everyone on the line. He said it felt so normal. Business as usual, and that's because our global focus on bringing your full self to work and design your day is not just a tick-the-box corporate program. It's a genuine effort to make our lives easier. I think that's when you really know you've got that successful initiative or policy or program. It doesn't feel like that. It just feels like you are genuinely changing that employee experience for the better, providing, in this case, opportunities for better balance and increased fulfillment. They're also doing something really, really smart. They're working to integrate recognition into that everyday employee experience to reinforce this notion of belonging and purpose and their unique contributions. So you can see the added benefit when integrated recognition is interconnected with fulfillment. So for instance, again, going back to balance, if somebody did great work, you could acknowledge and appreciate them, of course, for that great work, but also call out how they used their time autonomy to balance those responsibilities, to maintain their well-being, and to avoid burnout, to say, hey, you prioritize not just the work, but yourself and your mental health so you could continue to do great work sustainably moving forward into the future. So that's just one example. And you see, if you put those both together, it increases the fulfillment, the feelings of fulfillment in that balance bucket by 133 times. Purpose as well, right? That was a big one among our audience. Right now, 83% of employees are searching for more meaning in their daily responsibilities. 83% are showing up right now not really understanding why they're there or really connected to the impact that they're making. That's a tough one, 83%. So if you take the opportunity to sit down with your people in your one-to-ones and talk about balance and growth and community connection, belonging, and even this notion of purpose, and really figure out what is meaningful to them, what they're passionate about, what lights them up in their component of work, and connect that to the purpose of the organization, and then layer on top this moment of recognition where you're calling out how they're contributing along that journey and producing great work while they're connecting to that purpose and delivering impact. Man, it increases the odds, again, of feeling purpose in your life by 115 times. So you can see, again, how recognition can really reinforce all four of these pillars. So just a couple of recommendations, again, as you look to create and sustainably fulfill that experience for your people. First one is we need to continually, again, communicate that sense of community by showcasing how people are meaningfully contributing to that common purpose within their teams, within the department, and even the overall organization, how you are all moving forward in that great experience. We need to lean in to providing autonomy and flexibility to encourage balance. You know, employees, they really understand the need for guidelines and policies. They just want to have flexibility within those guidelines based on those roles, responsibilities, and those personal preferences. Flexibility really is the new currency, but we have to be very mindful like now to interconnect it with our DEI and B initiatives so people don't get lost in the wayside and promotions are all of a sudden, inequitable. So it's a really delicate balance to play, but again, it leads to such great fulfillment if we can figure it out. We need to offer opportunities for employees to demonstrate their mastery and competencies and again acknowledge how they're delivering on those. And again, recognition is a great fortifier of all of these pillars. So be sure to incorporate that. I have a question for you all. Who's in charge of creating a fulfilling employee experience? Yeah, it's our leaders. We have been studying leaders at the O.C. Tanner Institute for several years now, and year after year, we are just struck by the critical nature of their roles and their potential to create workplace environments where team members can really thrive and do their very best work. And historically, leaders have always fared far better than individual contributors, and they have felt more fulfilled, largely because they do have a lot more autonomy and control over their work environment, their work deliverables, etc. However, this year, for the very first time, we have found that leaders are experiencing the highest levels of stress and burnout. So I want to ask all of you in our next poll question here about burnout. So tell us what your current experience with burnout is. Is it mild? Would you say it's moderate? Do you think it's severe, right? Or, hey, if you've got it made, I do not suffer from burnout. I think that's also a great and viable answer, especially, again, I think as organizations continue to be more and more mindful about health and well-being and managing that from an entire cultural business perspective. Looks like our poll has ended. So, Catherine, I'm going to have you go ahead and throw up those results for us, which I think takes a couple of seconds. So hang with us. There we go. Okay, all right. So we've got about 30% saying that my burnout is mild, which is great. Coupled with our, 11% that says I do not experience burnout, which is wonderful, which is really, really wonderful. Again, burnout is just an indicator of your workplace culture and what is expected and how you all operate together. 47%, though, by and large, say moderate burnout right now, and 11% said severe. So we've really got more than half of our audience here today that are really experiencing some significant burnout and well-being constraints here. So yeah, that's really, really scary. And burnout, just so you know, maybe I can explain a little bit more. It actually is more than exhaustion. That is a part of it. Burnout is physical and mental exhaustion, but it also is feelings of futility that no matter what you do, a useful result cannot be produced. So, right, you're just banging your head against the wall. Why do I even try? Nothing ever changes. And because you are so exhausted and because you feel like you can't get anywhere, then avoidance creeps in, right? That's when people miss work or they avoid a colleague or a project because they just can't go there right now. So when we talk about burnout, it is so much more than physical or mental exhaustion. All of these factors really play in tandem with each other. Well, thank you so much for your honesty in those results. I think, one of the reasons why leaders are feeling more burnt out than ever before is that they are under the microscope, and frankly, they're being blamed for poor outcomes. So right now, 43% of leaders, and again, this is a large number, and maybe it could even, maybe some of you are like, it should be larger, but 43% of leaders are more likely to say that work is interfering with their ability to be happy in other areas of their lives. It is bleeding over into their personal lives, and it's interfering with their friends, with their family, with their ability to have fun with their hobbies, etc. And that's just not okay right now. Leaders are not feeling fulfilled. Burnout, I would say, has always been an issue among individual contributors, but it is extra troubling when it comes to leaders, because if we lose our leaders, many of you on the line here today experiencing burnout, then we lose the opportunity to build community, to provide a fulfilling workplace culture, and really have the glue that holds the organization together from the top as well as the bottom. But these findings really aren't surprising when you consider that leaders are dealing with expanded responsibilities and expectations. We ask, and we continue to ask, more and more of them. So managing team performance and delivering on outcomes, always a given. But we've also been asking them, and perhaps rightly so, of course, to watch out for their team's well-being and inclusion. We've asked them to adapt to managing remote and hybrid teams with very little training, and we've had them fill in on the work gaps, even as they hire and bring up a record number of employees to speed, right? It is so much. We have leaned on our leaders and asked them to step up in these times of crisis, but we haven't asked them a very important question, and that is, how are you doing? How are you holding up? Because while most organizations have really focused on that employee experience and engaging and retaining employees, they have swung the pendulum so far in this direction, we have overlooked our leaders, and to our detriment, frankly. In fact, Gartner recently found that only 14% of companies have deliberately attempted to ease their managers' burdens. So we have really failed to acknowledge that employees, in fact, or I should say leaders, in fact, are employees too. That said, they're really caught in a dual role identity trap. Yes, they are employees. Yes, they are leaders. And when you have conflicts arise from both the organization as well as those employees, they're torn. Like, they're just torn in the middle. And when that happens, they feel that conflict more, right? Appreciation goes down, exclusion more than double, right? Because they feel like they have been harpooned on an island, caught in between the needs of the organization and the demands of the employees. And because of that, they're experiencing far more burnout. I think that's why I'm particularly drawn to what Standard Chartered is doing. This is a retail bank in the UK with 750 branches in 50 countries around the world. And while most organizations are really spending their resources on senior leader development and support, they have narrowed in on those mid-level managers as key figures in their growth over time. And so rather than wholly redesigning the job of the mid-level manager in these times of crises, they began with some basic steps. They changed the role's title. Managers became known as people leaders, which was an acknowledgement of how important the human connection was in their work. And I think it's a very clear definition, right? Because most people get promoted because they're good at doing something. They're good doers. But it takes that extra layer to become a good influencer. And sometimes we fail to acknowledge leaders because it's the doers that get all of the credit. So we need to help create a clear definition of what a manager's responsibilities are and how we are going to acknowledge and appreciate their very active role in championing, in influencing, and growing and developing and connecting their teams to purpose, accomplishment, and to one another. So they did a really great job at that at Standard Chartered. They also created an accreditation process, right? They gave them the training, the resources, and the tools they needed to succeed in their roles. And then they strengthened a sense of managerial community. So they felt like they had friends and allies and people with similar perspectives of what was happening in the organization and the requirements of those roles and responsibilities. So just a few recommendations to help fortify our wary leaders. The first one here is to reduce the stress and anxiety for all leaders. And that really requires building intentional connections for all levels of leadership. And we need to remind them that they're an important part of our work community, not merely a mediator for employees or even the organization. The second one, which often goes unnoticed, is we need to consult with them and we need to consider the effects of change management plans on our leaders, right? How are those changes going to impact their workload, their well-being, their burnout, their inclusion, right, versus exclusion? So we need to as well make sure that we provide them with the training and resources necessary if they are going to shift their responsibilities and those roles, in fact, are changing. We just have to equip them to succeed. The last one, and I hinted at this a little bit in my comments earlier, that we need to lean into recognition. You know, we pay leaders more. And in our focus groups, it was very interesting. We asked a variety of leaders, hey, do you need recognition? And all of them were like, oh, no, I get paid more. I'm good. Like my pay, and they just kind of armor up. Nope, my pay is my recognition. And then we kind of chipped away at them a little bit. And all of a sudden, the walls kind of came down. And they said it would be really nice actually to be acknowledged and called out for the way that I am helping to support and champion my team, not just from my leaders, but I would really like to hear it from the people I work so hard to serve. I want to know if I'm on the right track, that I'm doing my very best work, and if something needs to be changed or adjusted. But I would just love some acknowledgement from my people. So again, increased pay doesn't necessarily equate to increased fulfillment. So we need to make sure that we're acknowledging what our leaders are contributing, especially our mid-level managers in terms of their work and how they uniquely contribute. I think that leads us on to a very exciting chapter in my mind, and that is, again, in order for any of this to work, in order to strengthen community, build fulfillment, and fortify our wary leaders, we have to move recognition from a once or twice a year transaction into a way of life, a natural response to great work. Last year, I should say, not last year, a couple of years ago, we published our recognition integration model. Again, a lovely index. We love our indices at EOC Tanner Institute because they help you evaluate and measure how well, in this case, recognition has become a part of the everyday employee experience, from the technology programs that you use and refresh to acknowledging people for those large and small contributions. If that recognition is seen broadly throughout the organization and beyond, that is given by peers and leaders, and is very individual and according to their preferences. This really helps you work it into that everyday experience and ensure that these moments are very meaningful and purposeful and personal to the individual. Recognition, especially integrated recognition, continues to be a key component of a thriving workplace culture because it doesn't matter what's happening in the world, the change, the challenge, the struggle, this always leads to positive outcomes. And we really saw that reflected in this story from TD Bank. For another LinkedIn Live, I had the opportunity to sit down with Janet Skaloud, which is their heads of global reward and recognition at TD. And she told me the story of a manager, a branch manager, Adam, who really leaned into recognition in the middle of the crisis. These are our frontline financial heroes that kept the world moving and turning from a financial standpoint. They had to come into work every day. And he acknowledged their sacrifice, and he acknowledged the unique ways that they were contributing and the value of what their personalities brought to the organization. Every single day, he found a moment of gratitude to share with everyone. And he said it was because even though someone may be going through a tough situation in their personal life, he wanted them to come to work and feel appreciated and supported. He said, colleagues have told me that this place is their haven. Imagine that happening in the middle of a global pandemic where connecting or interfacing with another individual risks your safety. This was your haven. This is your haven to feel visible, to feel seen, valued, and heard. That's an amazing, amazing outcome in the middle of such trying circumstances. Now, unfortunately, only 21% of organizations score high in recognition integration. I want that figure to sink in for a minute because recognition in the middle of this crisis has never become more heralded, right, to do by organizations because of these great outcomes. But only 21% are doing it in exceptional ways. So we really wanted to ask ourselves, why? Why is this number so low? And we discovered an underlying challenge, and that is our memories. Turns out, memories of past recognition experiences have a profound and enduring influence on how we perceive recognition now and how we perceive our culture. So like so many other things in life, we carry our history with us. The good, the bad, the ugly. It's all with us today, and it reflects and projects on how we view and treat others around us. So knowing this number is so low, I think it's safe to say that many employees have experienced less than meaningful recognition moments in the past. But that's an important insight because that helps us be far more intentional about providing early and frequent and meaningful recognition right in the door. Because check this out, if somebody came from a poor recognition culture, they are far more likely to view recognition as inauthentic, their leader isn't genuine, and they prefer not to receive recognition because the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. So here's the point. If only 21% of organizations score high on recognition integration, and so many organizations are focused on this, it's far more likely that when they hire new talent, they are inheriting recognition baggage, or in the spirit of yesterday's Halloween, the ghosts of recognition past. So knowing that memories are our primary barrier to really achieving a high RI culture, we can really start to unpack that and move the needle towards this important outcome. I'm telling you now, it's going to require some intentional commitment. This is not just a check the box exercise. It requires very thoughtfully designed programs that are aligned to culture and the education to really champion and help people create that moment of confidence that they can deliver a great, memorable experience for people. So a couple of recommendations here to really take full advantage of recognition to help offset or reframe, anybody who may doubt the authenticity or value of recognition. The first one is to recognize early as part of onboarding practices. When you think about that very first moment of impact, we're talking about day one, onboarding, right? This is your moment to neutralize those ghosts of the past, hit the reset button, and show them what a high RI culture is all about. So our research, as you'll see on the left, it really defined elements of a typical foundational as well as an ideal onboarding experience that can dramatically improve those memories and connections. And you'll notice here that there are a lot of recognition moments built in to help facilitate those connections between new hires, their team, and others in the organization. So anything from sending a note from leader and peers to having a custom or personalized symbolic award, assorted custom company swag, provide time to socialize and bring in food because that always connects people together. And then even as importantly, allow time for them to thank other people, introduce them to your recognition program and help them put that into motion. So this is really our time to exceed their expectations beyond the standard HR paperwork and the system setup that can make all of the difference, because ideal onboarding experiences like these increase the odds of inclusion by 89% and great work by 114. So great outcomes right out of the gate. I want to tell you the story about CIBC, which is a bank in Canada. They did a big return to work program, and they welcomed everyone back with this awesome backpack. It had a symbolic pin as well as a note attached saying that we are here to help you fulfill your ambitions, which I think is an incredible message, because usually it's the other way around. You're hired to help the organization fulfill its ambitions, but they reversed that model, which I thought was so cool. But now, everybody wants to feel part of this community, so they have folded in this gift as part of their onboarding package. And I love the story from Kajol. She was talking about how she went on vacation and she was boarding a plane with this backpack, and somebody tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Hey, do do you work at CIBC? Because I work at CIBC. Actually, there are a couple of other colleagues on this flight. We should all get together when we land and, just hang out and get to know each other. She said, the power of the CIBC community just blew me away. I couldn't contain my excitement for meeting fellow teammates, even on our days off. So she said to all aspiring students, new graduates, and current CIBC interns, that's the kind of community you become a part of when you join CIBC. The excitement is real, and I am loving the new swag. Love that story. Well, we can't stop there. We really dug deeper to fully understand, what's really holding us back in terms of integrated recognition. And we found that, the frequency of monetary, non-monetary, and company-wide recognition was just far too low. When you look at this low RI number over here, we're talking monetary and non-monetary recognition 7 times a year. I came from news and politics. If somebody would have said, thank you 7 times a year, it would have been the best year of my career. But now that I am a part of OC Tanner and I understand the value of all of this, look at what happens from a high RI culture standpoint. You're recognizing somebody with a monetary, even a micro-monetary component once a month, non-monetary every 3 weeks, and company-wide nearly every quarter. That's about 35 recognition experiences per employee per year. So you can see the dramatic uplift of what recognition at that capacity can really do. So I want to fire up our next poll question here and ask you all about the frequency of your recognition. When was the last time you received that recognition? Has it been in the last month, the last quarter, every 6 months, this year, or I have not received recognition? Go ahead and think about your time at your organization. Give you a couple more seconds to wrap up. Looks like our poll has ended and it's just processing on the back end. Catherine, go ahead and pull up those results once they're done. Moment of truth, everyone. Here we go. Oh, fantastic. It looks like 45% say in the last month I've received some form of recognition. 90 days, 14%, 6 months, all right, 9%. But then we get a little bit hard, once a year, or I have not received recognition. So we've got almost a bit of a polarizing situation here, right, where we've got a good chunk of our people saying, hey, the last 30 or 90 days I have received some recognition, but we've got 30% here that said it's either been once this year, and we're in November, folks. That's pretty difficult, or I have not received recognition. Well, hopefully these statistics have helped you see where we need to move the dial. So the other opportunity, which I really think is important in building and sustaining community, is the opportunity to have company-wide recognition. And we showed that needs to happen just about once a quarter, right? So we wanted to know, if these are so important, how much money should we be spending? How much is too much? How little is too little? So we did an experiment and we tested various dollar amounts on cultural outcomes. In this case, it's the probability of engagement. And we found that an award at a $5 mark actually detracted from engagement, whereas 50, 250, 500 all increased the probability of engagement, and in some instances very substantially. But you'll notice that it peters off about after 250, right? Those results just aren't as maximized. So really the sweet spot here is between $50 and $250 per employee per celebration. Say you've only got $250 per employee per year. You would be better off, again, and this leans into the frequency, of carving it up into smaller, more tailored experiences, never dipping below the $50 mark. That's where you're going to get the biggest impact. And knowing, again, all of these things pooled together, the frequency, the onboarding, we really need to provide people with the right education and tools to give them the confidence to recognize and create these memories that matter, right? So we need to really educate and have our employees understand why recognition matters and how it aligns to our strategic objectives and outcomes, and how to personalize it make it meaningful and appropriate in acknowledging the large and small accomplishments of our people. Sometimes low ROI organizations, they can limit and restrict who can give recognition and for what. And the opposite is really true with companies with high ROI. It's almost democratized, where everyone can participate and recognize and give that recognition for a variety of reasons. And lastly, we need to have the right tools embedded into our flow of work so it's easy to do and at our fingertips, whether that is, and then providing a variety of award types from micro-monetary e-cards to points to symbolic awards. That really leads us to our final chapter as we cruise through our 2023 Global Culture Report. Well, symbols have been a part of our history as human beings for a long, long time, and we know that symbolic awards intuitively help us connect to events and moments in our lives in ways that stay with us and embed in our memories. And it's so much so that we found that their ability to improve recall and that recognition moment is so substantial. Employees are 3 times more likely to remember that experience when it includes a symbolic award. So we're not talking about those plaques or certificates or tchotchkes. We are talking about curated awards that reflect your company's identity, reputation, and story. We went a step further and we really analyzed how that all stacked up against generic awards, capture gift cards, and redeemable points. We measured it for sentiment polarity, positive and negative, and the magnitude of that emotive connection. And you can see that in every instance, symbolic awards have a dramatic impact on that notion of memory. As compared to these other different types. You also see that cash, gift cards, and redeemable points are about on par with each other. So again, there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity depending on the type of personal or company-wide award you are interested in giving. So it's not just that our memories are enhanced. We have great culture and business outcomes as well. That chart in the upper right-hand corner, I know it might be a little bit tough for y'all to read, but we compared recognition moments with symbolism and without symbolism. So with symbolism is with the yellow line, without symbolism is just the green line. And the probability of increasing retention at the 6-month mark, the 1, 3, 5, 10, and 15. And you can see that in every instance, the inclusion of a symbolic award doubles or nearly doubles at the 1 and the 3 years. And this data is really consistent with trends that we see in the marketplace, where we are at a career high at 6 months, and then it just kind of peters down to the 5-year before ticking back up again. So this is a really important reminder of the value of early recognition that includes symbolism. Another important note is that the meaning of symbols increase over time. You can see at the 6-month mark, it's just marginal, right? When someone joins your organization, we're not going to pretend that they're going to be deeply connected to these symbols, but you can see those paths of divergence and the value and connections that they have with those symbolic awards really take a different path over time. And you can see that just that meaningfulness just skyrockets. And I use the word skyrocket intentionally because it reminds me of my grandfather. He's the handsome fellow on the right. He used to build rockets for a living, and every time they would launch something into space, they would receive a symbolic patch like this one. Or if it was really important, it was a piece of jewelry, like this bracelet that I have here today. Well, over his decades of experience at this organization, he collected dozens of patches and pieces of jewelry. And my mom put them together into an heirloom quilt that was, much to our surprise of our little family, was honored and displayed by the community because they felt so connected to the legacy of putting people into space and defying gravity. To this day, I still have this very beautiful pin. I know you probably can't see it, but it's a pin that my grandfather received 75 years ago. And I didn't know this until I joined O.C. Tanner a couple of years ago, that was a pin that was originally manufactured by O.C. Tanner. And so you can see that really if you do these things well, right, symbols not only unite your people organizationally, but they can interconnect them generationally in ways that help you feel very connected to the people before you, right? I still take an immense amount of pride in my grandfather's contributions. And the reason why these symbolic awards are so meaningful is because they tell your organization's story. And when you give them to an employee, they become a part of that story and that legacy and culture these symbols, they really become badges of honor, and they're infused with meaning and memories that just continue to build and compound over time. It increases those connections, the feelings of belonging, and it cultivates that community. And so you can really see how these can be extraordinarily powerful and effective. These are just a few examples of, again, highly curated and wonderful awards that increase that sense of belonging. Here's one we produced for Salesforce. You would never know that Salesforce, a technology company, is so connected to the surf culture, but that's a very big part of the CEO's experience and what he wants to do in welcoming people into the organization. But I love what Trent here has to say, or Zach, my apologies, Zach. He says, I received my 3-year anniversary award this past week. I'm not normally one for trophies, but when I opened this up, it gave me pause, and I reflected on what it represents. A career pivot into tech, a new skill set, a company that celebrates and embraces who I am, leaders who have supported me fiercely, a pandemic, adapting to a work-from-home environment, cross-country move, a new city, an acquisition, an improved quality of life. The list goes on and on. He says, thank you, Salesforce, for welcoming me into the Ohana 3 years ago and being so much more than a great place to work. You can certainly feel like he belongs to a community. So when symbolic awards are meaningful, they're used early, and they're part of a great recognition experience, the probability of having a thriving culture increases by nearly 18 times. These are the types of cultures where people feel part of a community, where they're connected to the meaning and relevancy of their experience, where they're feeling fulfilled, and consequently they are resilient and they find new and great ways to deliver on work. So just as a brief wrap up, I know we're closing in on time here. Employees, they want to join and meaningfully contribute and stay with companies with healthy workplace communities. Fulfillment is really a superior indicator of employee sentiment and the propensity to do great work. We must fortify our wary leaders, remember that they're employees too, and hire cultures that incorporate symbolic awards, strengthen that community, increase fulfillment, and reward the people that are here, helping making it all work together. Well, you can download that full Global Culture Report for free at octanner.com. And as mentioned, always happy to connect on LinkedIn with you. And with that, hey, let's take some questions. Annika, I'll turn the moment to you before we pass it back to Catherine.
Perfect. One question we have from the audience, going back to the initial poll about the components of fulfillment.
Yeah.
At the juxtaposition of those core concepts suggesting that they are separate, they can only be community versus purpose and balance versus growth, or are they complementary?
Oh, they're definitely complementary. Yeah, it all works in tandem together. So again, it's something where when you have a great sense of purpose and you can help people understand that purpose, that also folds into this notion of community, right? Because if you think about community is belonging with a purpose, right? So again, they all kind of interweave and interconnect. And again, if you're growing and developing and contributing in meaningful ways, that growth and development directly ties into how you feel about your purpose at that organization, how meaningful that work is. So they all kind of interconnect and intersect together, but we're measuring them in four different components, but they certainly overlap.
Perfect. Another question. You mentioned that recognition fortifies all aspects of fulfillment. What are some best practices for recognizing people?
Yeah, so I gave a little bit of a sneak peek on that initial discovery process that we went through, but it really is, when you think about a great recognition experience that you have either been the recipient of or that you have observed or given, my guess is that it not only just calls out the great work, but it calls out how that person has uniquely contributed, right? So if you say, hey, Sally, you have done such a phenomenal job in helping us achieve our Q3 results. I mean, the way that you helped us deliver on the purpose of the organization and your own passion infused with that made all of the difference. I mean, I saw you grow and develop. You took on new roles and new skills fearlessly to make sure that everything got done in a way that really drove these outcomes. What's another? We feel like you are just such a viable and valuable part of our team. We just can't imagine working without you. And I'm so impressed how you managed to really juggle it all in a spirit of autonomy in ways that help provide a great personal life balance for you so you didn't burn out. So you could be with us and also with your family and friends and doing the hobbies that you love. So you had a great fulfilling experience, and this isn't something that burnt you out. So you can kind of see, again, that it's this great thing that they accomplish, but the way you interweave how they uniquely contribute across these areas of fulfillment, it can really reinforce those feelings by calling that out.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay, sure.
We have a symbolic reward that some people love and others dismiss. Would you recommend giving people choices, perhaps all identified with a company symbol?
Yeah, you know what's really interesting? The answer is yes. So we work with clients, of course. We do a very, very deep dive discovery with them to learn their stories, to learn what matters to them. And it often is not just among a limited group of people. We pull in a variety of perspectives when we go through this discovery process. But to your point, some of our clients, they want their people to have that kind of option. So they'll even have options for choosing what type of symbolic award that they receive, whether that's like an emblem or a belt buckle or whatnot. We also have one of the clients that I'm thinking about in particular is Pokemon, and we have a beautiful careerscape. You got like a really quick glance of that, but it's almost gamified to them. So a careerscape is something, it's a beautiful piece of symbolism that has different elements that you can add to it. And when somebody joins the organization, they can choose which Pokemon character they want to be, and they can really personalize their whole journey according to, the career milestones that they achieve, the personal accomplishments, the great work, etc. So when they leave, they live with a very personalized, almost mini trophy case that really tells the experience that they have at their organization. So yeah, having that flexibility and that autonomy for people to choose what symbolic elements ring most true to them is absolutely on par as a best practice. I think we only have one more minute left, Annika, so I don't know if we need to turn that back to Catherine, but it's been a pleasure and honor to be with all of you today, and I look forward to interfacing with you in the future.